Hello, welcome back to my channel, Everyday Poll. My name is Paulina. Today we have a 2022 year in review book review. I'm going to talk about the 7 books that I read this year, go in order, talk about the title of the book, the author, what I rated the book, a brief summary of the book, no spoilers, and let me know what you think. If you've read any of these books, let me know if you enjoyed them, what you liked, what you didn't like, and we can have a little bit of discourse in the comments. I have 4 out of the 7 books that I read this year. Borrowed the other books from the library, so I don't have a hard copy of them. The first book that I read this year was Verity by Colleen Hoover. This was my first Colleen Hoover book. I would describe it as being creepy, eerie, thriller. Verity is a best-selling author. She is sick and she is bedridden after a horrible accident. This book follows Lowen, who is a struggling author and writer, and Lowen is basically hired by Jeremy, who is Verity's husband, to complete the remaining books in her book collection or book series. Lowen finds this manuscript as she's living in Verity and Jeremy's house, and the plot builds from there. I really like this book. I gave it 4 stars. It definitely had some jump scares. I found that especially after I got through probably the first quarter of the book, it was very much a page turner, and I think I was kind of in a reading slump when I read this, so it really got me back into reading. The next book I read was Malcolm Gladwell's Blink. I read other Malcolm Gladwell books, and I thought that this one was just okay. I think I gave it a 3 or 3.5 stars. This book basically emphasizes the fact that our split decisions, the decisions that we make on a very quick basis, rather than thinking a lot about a decision or a choice, can often be just as good as those decisions that are well thought out. Malcolm's book follows a wide variety of examples where he really highlights that your snap decision making can often be better, and trusting your instincts is better than you realize. I thought it was okay. It kind of dumped between saying that split decision making and really well thought out decision making are both good and bad at the same time. So I think that the book wasn't as succinct and tight as I would have liked. I would recommend this book, but I think that Malcolm Gladwell has other books that would probably be my recommendation. I really liked Outliers, and I would probably recommend Outliers over Blink. The next book I read is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, and I would say that this book is very suspenseful, it's romantic. This is a fantasy book. It has elements of spiciness and romance. Absolutely loved it. I think that fantasy is definitely a genre that I prefer. I had been waiting to read this series because I heard such good things. After I finished this book, I immediately decided to order the next one, and I can't wait to read A Court of Mist and Fury. This book basically follows Feyre, who is a huntress, and she kills a wolf close to her home. And after she does that, she is captured by these immortal and high, what's called fairies. So it's F-A-E-R-I-E-S. She is taken away from her home to live amongst the fairies. Feyre basically finds that she has feelings for this fairy that captured her. You learn about Feyre's family and their interaction. She has 2 sisters and she has a father. And then you also learn about the fairies that she interacts with in her new home. I thought that the book was just so well thought out. I thought that it was very descriptive. I felt like I was truly there. And I also thought that this was very action-packed. There are battles and competitions, and you're kind of on the edge of your seat trying to figure out whether Feyre will ever return home and how she is living her new life amongst the fairies. The next book I read was A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl, which follows Viktor E. Frankl after his life in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany, living in Auschwitz and dealing with immense and extreme suffering and torture and the horrors of the Holocaust. The book follows a psychology concept that Viktor E. Frankl himself, a psychiatrist, piloted that basically discusses logotherapy, which studies that life has meaning at every stage, life has meaning every day. There is meaning in life, in suffering, even after life and in death. This is definitely a heavy book, but it's something that I think everybody should read in their lives. I think this is one of those books that you read it and you can find something to take away from the book. I definitely recommend you check this one out. The next book I read was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. If you haven't read this book yet, you have to read it. It was such a page turner. It was fun, and it followed this complicated and incredible character, Evelyn Hugo. This book, I think, was set in the 1950s and 60s. The book follows just different chapters with Evelyn's relationship with her husband, newspaper clippings, and it follows a magazine reporter, Monique, who is tasked with writing about Evelyn's life. And you kind of get the book from Evelyn's perspective, from Monique's perspective, from the 7 husbands' perspective. And I really felt, even though Evelyn had some questionable traits to her personality, I felt like I really connected to Evelyn as a reader, and I can't say enough good things about this book. I gave this book a 5 stars. I totally was not expecting the ending. I think maybe I had some hints along the way, but I was still blown away. I cried at the end of this book, and I feel I do not cry at the end of every book, but books that make me cry, obviously, they change you fundamentally forever. I think those are the books that I really remember the plot. I just connect with the characters in different ways, and if you're going to read a book, I definitely recommend reading The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Sorry, I'm also just taking my iPad and pulling up my Goodreads so I can read you my review. Yeah, I think I just said that it was beautifully written. So the next book that I read was The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This was a kind of a fantasy, but probably more so a mystery, light thriller, young adult read. This book basically follows Avery Grams, who's in high school, a very smart and studious girl, and all of a sudden you find out that she has inherited billions of dollars from a large business owner and philanthropist, and the whole story is kind of trying to figure out why she had inherited this large amount of money. And you find out that the person that she inherited this money from, billionaire Tobias Hawthorne, didn't give any money to his 4 grandsons, to some of his daughters, and the whole book is trying to figure out why. The only requirement for Avery to keep this $1 billion is for Avery to live in the house where the billionaire's grandsons live, to just live with them and interact with them and try to find out a bunch of puzzles and mysteries out that way. I give this book a 4 stars, definitely a page turner, and I'm excited to read the next book in this series. I didn't give it 5 stars just because I felt like I could kind of anticipate the ending, and I think that once I actually got to the end, I still had a lot of questions. I mean, maybe that's why it's a series. There's more questions that are being answered in the second book, but I definitely enjoyed The Inheritance Games. It was a quick and easy read, and I recommend it. The last book that I read was 9 Perfect Strangers by Liane Moriarty. Liane Moriarty has wrote a ton of other popular books. This was the first one that I read. It follows basically 9 strangers who all come to this tranquil health resort, and you kind of follow each of the characters, learn why each of them are there. Some for mental health issues, relationship issues. They stay at this health resort for, I think it was 9 or 10 days. And the book also follows how the characters interact with the staff that works at the health resort. I would say that this book had its strengths in the setting. You're trying to find out why they're at this health resort, what are the reasons, what are their interactions like. But I would say that I was kind of disappointed through the latter half of the book. I think that the reader kind of got lost. It wasn't as big of a twist as I was expecting. But I will say that the one thing that I really liked, I tend to like books that have this, but I really liked how the actual book itself was taking place over the course of like 10 days. So you kind of were anticipating when we would get to the end of the health resort, the health retreat. And I find that books that kind of set themselves up with that timeline are always really interesting and engaging to read. Those were all of the books that I read in 2022. I definitely have a goal of at least 12 books in 2023, at least 1 book a month. These are some of the books that I'm thinking of reading, but let me know if you have any must-read recommendations. I definitely know that I'm going to be reading A Court of Thorns and Roses, next book in the series, and I'll probably read another Colleen Hoover book. Let me know if you liked this book review video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!